The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Monday, February 22nd, 2015. Thank you so much for joining us. You could have been anywhere in the world. I say that every day, but I really mean it. You could have been anywhere, but you decided to spend some time with us, and I greatly appreciate it. Tonight, we have a lot of things going on. We're going to continue our series of interviews with progressive candidates, particularly progressive candidates who believe in the political and the economic revolution that is going on around us. Despite evidence to the contrary, despite Nevada, there is still a political and economic revolution happening. And so tonight we will be joined by Alex Law. He's a congressional candidate out of New Jersey, and he's going to tell us about his platform, as well as why he identifies as a progressive and what he's bringing to the table in terms of progressivism. So he's going to join us at the top of the show. After that, we're going to talk about all the things that are happening in the news, a lot of things happening in the news. Matter of fact, speaking of the news, there's some things happening right now. The show. After that, we're going to talk about all the things that are happening in the news. A lot of things happening in the news. There's always that. Okay, so there we have that loop and that feedback. But I wanted to go over the your daily briefing, the Progressive Army daily briefing, starting with the Kalamazoo killer. Kalamazoo, Michigan, Uber driver who picked up passengers during his rampage. The man accused of killing 6 people on Saturday, injuring more than 2 others on the Saturday evening shooting rampage in Kalamazoo, Michigan, was an Uber driver who picked up and dropped off his passengers between shootings. According to investigators, Jason Brian Dalton was even looking for fares after the final shooting of a nearly 7-hour killing rampage. I am very curious as to how Uber is performing today in light of all that's happened over the weekend. When school superintendent in Crystal City, Texas, saw the murky, strange-smelling water coming out of her sister's faucet last week, she knew that this was a problem that she would have to deal with on her own. She is quoted as saying, "Right now, there's not really anyone in charge to oversee, to make people aware of the condition of the water. This is because in this single city in San Antonio, 130 miles north of San Antonio, the mayor pro temp, a council member, and the city manager were all arrested on bribery and conspiracy charges. On top of that, another member of the city council is in federal detention after he admitted to smuggling undocumented Mexican workers across the border." So in this one single town, there is no leadership because all of the leadership has been arrested. And this is in the middle of a problem with their water supply, that the water is now as black and murky as anything that they have ever seen. This is interesting news coming from the Vatican. Pope Francis on Sunday called for the worldwide abolition of the death penalty, saying that the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," was absolute and equally valid for the guilty as for the innocent. Using some of his harshest rhetoric against capital punishment ever, the Pope also called on Catholic politicians worldwide to make a courageous and exemplary gesture, seeking a moratorium on executions during the church's holy year, which ends in November. I appeal, the Pope said, "I appeal to the consciences of those who govern to reach an international consensus to abolish the death penalty." Interesting news out of Syria on the international front. John Kerry announces a provisional agreement in Syria. Secretary of State John Kerry said on Sunday that he and his Russian counterpart had reached a provisional agreement in principle for a temporary truce in the Syrian civil war, and that it could start, this truce can begin within days. Kerry said that he spoke on Sunday with his Russian counterpart, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, for a second day in a row, and that the final details are being ironed out on a phone call between President Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is amidst this many years of civil war in which over 250,000 people have been killed. There appears to be a ceasefire that's in the works. Author Harper Lee was buried in her Alabama hometown. The author of the American classic To Kill a Mockingbird was laid to rest on Saturday in a private ceremony that was only attended by her closest friends and family. This was a direct reflection of the way Harper Lee lived her life. She died on Friday at the age of 89 and was eulogized at a church in the small town of Monroeville, Alabama, which the author used as a model for the imaginary town Maycomb, which is the setting of her Pulitzer Prize-winning novel. Last but not least, and we're going to talk about this one in depth, Ohio Governor John Kasich on Sunday signed legislation to strip over $1 million in government money from Planned Parenthood. The bill prohibits roughly $1.3 million in mostly federal grant funding that Planned Parenthood receives through Ohio's Department of Health from going to entities that perform or promote abortions. According to the Associated Press, this money has been going toward HIV and STD screenings, breast and cervical cancer screenings, amongst other services. That is your moderate Republican there, John Kasich. The nice Republican. He has stripped over $1 million from Planned Parenthood. Never mind all of the things that they do in addition to abortions. Never mind all the things that they do to prevent abortions. Never mind all the lives that they actually help to save. The most moderate Republican has defunded or stripped away over $1.3 million from Planned Parenthood. During this primary season, I would say the entire purpose of that is nothing more than political posturing to get an advantage with evangelical voters. Now, that was some bit of your Progressive Army Daily Briefing. Truth be told, we're still working on that format. So anyways, moving on. That's everything that you need to know to be abreast on tomorrow morning. Let's jump right into this interview. I've asked Alex Law to join me this afternoon for the interview. He has been patient, and I want to get him in here. He is a progressive candidate out of New Jersey. Alex, thanks so much for joining me. Are you there?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Definitely my pleasure. We would like to know more about you. I have been on your website. I've had a chance to read what you stand for, and I could regurgitate it to my listeners, but I think it's more effective if you would just tell us very briefly about who you are, the district that you're running in, and what you represent.
Sure. So I grew up here in South Jersey. I went to public high school here. I played football. I played basketball. I ended up going up to NYU Stern, getting 2 degrees, one in finance, one in information systems. And then after that, went and did some strategy consulting for IBM. And how this campaign started is some friends and I were sitting around. We were watching TV. We were seeing things we didn't like nationally, what was going on in Washington. We saw a tremendous amount of corruption and graft locally. And what we said was, rather than sit on our butts and complain about it, why don't we get out there and do something about it? Okay. So we made some flyers, not as nice as the ones we have now, and we just went out and started knocking on doors, me and 2 or 3 people. And from that, we now have over 120 volunteers. We've knocked on 40,000 doors. Wow. We've made about 50,000 phone calls, and we've created the most robust insurgent campaign in the last 2 decades in New Jersey. Something we're very proud of.
Alex, I have to jump in there for a second. Let's talk about 120 volunteers, 40,000 doors knocked on, and 50,000 phone calls. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, you're hearing me correctly. And that's something that grows every single day. We're eventually going to get up to around 100,000 doors knocked, over 100,000 phone calls made, and in the hundreds of volunteers. We have new people joining every week.
Let me ask you, how much of that is, as much as you can disclose, how much of that is pure volunteerism versus paid workers? How much does it cost for you to get that many volunteers knocking on that many doors? How are you pulling that off?
Well, we don't have a single paid person on the entire team. The entire team, from our staffers to myself to all of our volunteers, everyone is doing this because they believe in the campaign. Now, we are a campaign that takes 0%. We take no money from corporations, no money from super PACs. all of the money that we've raised so far has been through generous folks contributing on our website. We have over 1,000 donors, and our average donation is less than $30, right along with Bernie Sanders.
Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive that you have that many. I'm looking for my applause track. That's actually worth definitely worth an applause. And before we go into the details about your campaign, I'm fascinated with the amount of people that you've been able to get to volunteer for you, because I think part of the problem with campaign finance reform is that there's these massive staffs that need to be paid, right? It's not just corporations who want to pour money in. A lot of times it's staffers who want to get paid, who need to get paid. And you're saying that the bulk of what you've done has been completely based on volunteers, those 50,000 phone calls and those 40,000. That is really, really something. I mean, tell me a little bit more about that, because I'm gonna be honest with you, that's hard to believe, but I don't have any reason not to believe you.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, it comes down to a couple of things. So it comes down to the first thing, without getting into the weeds of it just yet, it comes down to the fact that there is a tremendous amount of corruption around here. The incumbent is someone who is part of a political family that is widely disliked. And the fact that we're putting together the first legitimate challenge to their stranglehold on this region is something that has gotten a lot of people excited. Number two, we have innovative organization and management in this campaign. I designed the campaign strategy with former presidential candidate Michael Dukakis, where we have split up the district into small bite-sized zones so that when we're giving folks things, instead of it all being centralized at our wonderful campaign headquarters, it is decentralized into the neighborhoods that our volunteers live in. And then they can then bring in new volunteers in the areas that they live in, and it makes things a lot more efficient. Number three, we are very, very tight with our data, with our targeting, with our analytics. That's my background. I made sure that we are as sharp as possible with that. So the combination of all of these things coming together, and the very smart team we have working with us that has designed tools like callsforalex.com, where we have supporters all across the country, the state, in our district, wherever, making phone calls for us through that website. It's very similar to the platform that Bernie had a little while ago. He's since developed a much nicer one. I wish we had the money to do that. We don't right now, but we do have a lot of people making calls for us on there that might not even live in the district, but want to make a difference in a progressive grassroots race.
Okay, so I really like that. I haven't gotten into any of your platform, what you stand for. I mean, I've read it, but I haven't discussed it with my audience. But you and Sanders are doing something that that is so critical, in my opinion, to the future of elections. One, because and I have to reiterate this, and this is mainly for my audience, not you. I'm sure you know this, but a lot of the reason there's so much money in campaigns is because you have these large staffs that must be paid. And you know, every campaign that has somebody knocking on the door generally is either a paid intern or a paid staffer. And you guys are pulling off something that is phenomenal. It's citizen buy-in and involvement. So with that being said, where can we get access to, if someone in the audience likes what you're doing and they want to participate in this phone banking, where they can phone bank from anywhere in the country? If at the end of this conversation they really like you, where can they do that at?
So they can go directly to callsforalex.com, or they can go to our website, alexlawforcongress.com, and there's a link to that Calls for Alex site there.
Okay, I love that. I love that. And the reason I love that is because what we're building here is the Progressive Army. And right now in 2016, it has to be a virtual Progressive Army until in 2020, when we can get boots on the ground. But we can actively help your campaign. If after we grill you, they still like you.
Absolutely. That's what I want to say is wait until you find out what I stand for. I never ask anyone to blindly support me. I got to earn your vote or earn your support. But what I will say, if you do support us, and look, it's great if you want to chip in and help out with $5, $20, whatever you got, we will gladly take it, because it all goes 100% into our grassroots effort, and you will be helping people knock on doors and have the materials that they need so that we can be successful. But we would love to have you donate some time, and it is so crucial, because in that last month, it could very well be the phone calls that are made through Calls for Alex that determine this race, because it is going to be tremendously, tremendously close.
All right, let's get to the issues. Let's see if you stand for what my audience likes and what they need to hear. I see that you stand for campaign finance reform. You are for no voter ID laws whatsoever. Before I move past that too quickly, what does that actually mean?
Well, so here's the thing, right? So voter fraud is a non-existent crime. I think John Oliver put it very succinctly when he said, no one is going to stand in line for 2 hours and risk 5 years in federal penitentiary and $100,000 in fine to vote for somebody else. It is a crime that simply does not happen. And to put in these voter ID laws, it's very plain that the only reason that they're put in place is to keep minority voters, who often vote Democrat and progressive, from influencing election in areas traditionally controlled by Republicans. We've seen that's very plain in places like Alabama, where they have closed the offices in which people would be able to go and get these voter IDs only in the primarily African-American communities, severely disadvantaging these people. And it is absolutely unacceptable. It is distracting from real important issues that we need to solve. While we're trying to fight conservatives over voter ID, which shouldn't even be a conversation at all these horrible things are getting passed behind our backs. So that's how I feel about that issue.
Okay. All right. And so in terms of actually, in terms of legislation, are you going to present legislation that across the board there are no, because that's really a state by state issue. How would you in Congress actually affect that?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things that could go on with how we deal with voting. I think there's no reason why, like in certain states, we can't have some kind of universal system where folks can either very easily vote from home, which is easier in some places and more difficult in others, or where we can't vote online or digitally. We do our medical care online, we do our finances online. We have the best data scientists in the world, in this country. There's no reason we can't make voting easier for people rather than difficult. And I would look at different ways that we can solve that, but I would also lend my voice to the voice of common sense nationally to say, hey, we can't have these voter ID laws. They're unconstitutional, and we need to push them out.
Okay. All right. So let me move on to some more of your topics, because I know I don't have you for long. LGBTQ rights. You want to defend the freedom of our government from, actually, that's out of place. Tell me more about where you stand, marriage equality, and in particular, what do you want to accomplish as a congressman from New Jersey on LGBTQ rights?
Yeah, well, it's a very simple thing. So a lot of people think the battle's over because we have same-sex marriage.
Right.
And that is wonderful accomplishment, but the unfortunate reality is it's not over. There's two major things that we can do at a federal level that will help millions of Americans overnight. The first is there needs to be comprehensive workplace protection for all parts of the LGBTQ community. Very, very important. And it doesn't exist everywhere. In places like the Northeast where I'm from, people take that for granted, but the reality is there are places where it doesn't exist. Number two, we need to have federal hate crime protection, just like there are for other groups of people, for LGBTQ people. The reason for that is in Philadelphia, one of the most gay-friendly places in the entire country, there was a gay bashing incident about a year ago, and these people just got very, very light sentences, even though they explicitly attacked this couple because of their sexual orientation. Now, if you attack someone because they were Jewish or because they were African American, you would face stiffer penalties because of that. And we need to make sure that our friends in the LGBTQ community have that protection.
I think people don't realize that there are many states where there is no protection from discrimination for being LGBTQ. There was a victory for marriage equality, but there are still states where companies can legitimately discriminate against you because of your sexual orientation. And you're saying that you want to tackle that issue head on.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting one because almost everywhere else in my policy and the way that I view things, I'm looking to get people out of prisons. And this is one area where I think we actually need stiffer law and order. Now, in terms of what I think with criminal justice reform, I often say that You know, in America, we have a creed, the land of the free, but the American deed does not match the American creed, because we imprison more people than any country in the history of the world. And primarily, the people that are imprisoned are young African-American males. Why? Because we have ridiculous drug policy where we're throwing people in prison for having marijuana or small quantities of other drugs. So number one, we need to change our culture in the United States where we're trying to punish drugs, where we're trying to treat people with drugs and get them healthy. Number two, we need to legalize marijuana on a federal level. I think that's very important. We've seen in the states that have been the laboratories for democracy, in Colorado and Washington State, that it's been an overwhelming success. Most new millionaires anywhere in the country, crime rates have gone down, funding for education has gone up. It works. And we need to make sure that we implement, because we have ridiculous, horrible things happening. Private prisons sprouting up all over the place. The judicial system incentivized to send more and more young, potentially productive members of society to prison to be pretty much permanently part of being institutionalized. And that is a horrible thing. And we need to make sure that that stops now.
All right, let's drill down there. So you sound very passionate about that. You sound very, you sound ready, right? All jokes aside, you sound ready. You sound like you're ready for a debate. You sound like you're ready for the issues. But I'm curious on the criminal justice reform, how you sound convincing. But tell me, 5 years ago, before you even thought about running for office, did something like criminal justice ever cross your mind?
Well, it did. I mean, this is 5 years ago, by the way. I would have been 19 years old, because when I win this election, I'm going to be the youngest congressman elected since 1974. I'm 24 years old right now. I'll be 25 by the time I'm elected. But these are things that I was thinking about. I was a student at a finance university. I actually wrote one of my thesis papers on the economics of private prisons and why they're a horrible thing for this country. So this is something that I've thought a tremendous amount about. And it was something that was eye-opening when you saw places like California literally shipping the poorest prisoners from California to private prisons in Tennessee. Not only was that bad in terms of human rights, it was bad because these people did not have the resources to get their lawyers out there, to get their family out there to see them. And they were stuck in a foreign place, in a place where it felt like no one was listening or caring about them, and it's wrong.
Alex, I'm not easily impressed. I'm almost impressed. You really should. I know it's the last second. We put this interview together at the last second, so this is no fault of your own. But I really need to get you back on the air so we can do a video so people can actually see the passion in your eyes. I can hear it in your voice, but we want to get you back on to do video so they can see the passion in your eyes. You almost have me convinced. You wrote a thesis about this in college about private prisons. And so this has been something even before you started running for office. This is something that was near and dear enough to you to actually make a thesis out of it. And I think that I'd like to read that. I think that speaks volumes. Let me ask you about two critical things that when I first saw your site, I didn't see mentioned. The first one is I see that you support Israel, which no problem on supporting Israel. When I first came to your site, I didn't see anything about Palestine. So where do you fall in terms of Israel and Palestine?
Well, so I am a Jewish American. I've traveled to Israel. And it's something that I think is a very interesting, delicate issue. Now, I do not support the Netanyahu administration. I think he has been one of the worst things, both internally for Israel and internationally for Israel's reputation, that has happened to the country in a very long time. I think that we absolutely need to be looking at how we can create a two-state solution that works, because I believe Palestinians have a right to have their own country there. And I think there's some really troubling things that go on both sides that make it very, very difficult for us to understand here in America where these things aren't happening. You know, without getting too deep into that specific issue, it's a very, very difficult situation. I support Israel as our ally. I support them as the shining example of democracy in the Middle East. But I do think that we need to make sure that Palestinians have some sovereignty in that region, that they have their own country, that they have international recognition, and that we can be a part of finding that solution the best that we can.
In your opinion, what is the greatest hindrance to that solution finding? I mean, obviously, besides hundreds of years of conflict in the region. But politically, right now, today, what can you do in Congress, and what would you like to see done with our ally Israel to actually bring that two-state solution to pass?
Yeah, well, so when I was in Israel, we were talking with a very liberal professor there, someone who, despite being Israeli, despite being Jewish, was very much in the middle on this issue. And there's a couple of things that I think aren't talked about a lot here in the States that are very divisive politically, locally to it there. And you have issues when they're trying to draw the border of where this new state should be carved out of. You have Palestinian states that have used, or Palestinian cities that have used to being under Israeli Western law that do not want to switch to a Sharia law country. You have an issue where Palestinians, unlike any other group, I think anywhere in the world, maintain their migrant status for generations, even though they've settled in Jordan. And that's because Jordan doesn't want to give them citizenship there. So they're sort of growing in population, whereas other people that might have been dislocated justly or unjustly, then when they settle next generation or two, they become Jordanians or wherever it is they settle. So these are political issues that are very difficult to deal with because you have a huge population of Palestinians that exist 3-4 generations, and you have issues with where you're going to draw. How do you draw this boundary? Because there's some towns that want to be in Palestine, some towns that want to stay in Israel, but Israel says if there's going to be two states, that all of the Palestinian towns have to go into Palestine. It becomes a local political issue. It's very difficult. So again, I kind of a little deep in it, but as the United States, I think that, we can be there and help these negotiations and use our presence in the region, our economic ability to sort of help solve this the best we can.
And absolutely. And I know I don't have you for 3 days. We can unpack that for 3 days straight, to be fair to the subject. So feel free, if you want to share some links or anything to supplement the conversation, I'll be more than happy to spread them. Let me jump to my last topic that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about. I do have a caller on hold. I didn't, we'll chat about that. I'll send you a message. Here's my
by the way, I could stay a little longer. If you need an extra 5 minutes or something, we're having a great conversation. I'd be happy to stay a little longer.
Good. Because the next question is something else I didn't see on your website. And the reason I think it's important to bring it up, that you get it on your website as soon as possible. Black Lives Matter in particular. I know we talked about criminal justice reform, but in this, I'm talking about, I want to talk about something specific. Today I was a part of a forum on the Sanders subreddit about how Bernie Sanders can reach the African-American vote. And there is this tension between quote unquote Bernie bros, which are usually labeled as white guys about your age group, even though I've been called a Bernie bro, but I digress. The point is, there's this tension, or this perceived tension, between the Bernie Sanders subreddit, Reddit in general, Bernie bro population, and the African-American vote. In terms of race, in terms of racial justice, in terms of police brutality, all categorized as Black Lives Matter, where do you stand? And what are your thoughts? And then I'll unpack it from there.
Yeah, well, so this is something that is near and dear not only to me, but to my region. My district has Camden, New Jersey, the poorest town in the entire United States, the town with the most violence anywhere in the United States. Camden is a place that has had tremendous challenges, and it is a place that is primarily Latino and African American, with most being African American in Camden. It's the biggest city in my district, so this is a very important issue. I 100% support the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it is absolutely critical for our national conversation, for our national culture, that we embrace this, that we make sure that there is accountability with police. Most police are good people, but like in any profession, there are issues, and we have the technology, whether it's with body cams or other things, to make sure that there is accountability with law enforcement, and most law enforcement is open and welcomes these new changes. Now, let me tell you just briefly, because this is very important, I think, for people who are getting to know me and learning why I'm running and why I said the Norcrosses are, quote, corrupt or graft or whatever. They have been systematically taking advantage of Camden, New Jersey for decades. This is an area that has had overwhelming Democratic control for 30 years. And Camden has only gotten worse and worse and worse, while only 5 miles away you have places like Haddonfield, New Jersey, which is one of the wealthiest places in the entire United States. To me, you got to ask, how does that happen? And the answer is that my opponent, Congressman Norcross, when he was in the state assembly, he would write bills that would then financially benefit his family, and would be able to get them passed because they supposedly addressed Camden issues. And very, very quickly, an example of that, and we outline this on the website, alexlawforcongress.com, is this bill that said, okay, let's stimulate economic growth in Camden. So it said, let's send $1.1 billion there to create jobs. Sounds like a great idea. The problem is almost all of it, like 900 million of it, went to companies that either his family owned, controlled, or were donors to his campaign. And they are creating jobs at $300,000 per job. I could give any one of your listeners, or you, or me, $300,000 in cash today. You could have no business plan and you could create more than one job. I guarantee you that. And what's happening on top of that is because these companies are coming in and grabbing land in Camden so aggressively, land prices, according to banks, are going up, which means residents who actually pay taxes, these corporations get 20 years of tax abatements, their taxes are going up. So they're being pushed out of their homes, people who already have financial hardship and difficulty, so that corporations can buy more of their land. And this is the kind of policies that we're dealing with here in South Jersey.
I hear you and I follow you. I follow the connection between the lack of economic investment, money that comes to your district that should rightfully go to some of the areas, including Camden, and they have been excluded because of potential political corruption, whatever the proper phrase is, whether it was actual corruption or whether it was done properly and just still not in the best interest of its constituents. I hear you. My question, though, is in terms of the disconnect between, because I would let me start here. You sound passionate about it. I hear you, but it's not on your website. It's not on your website in terms of Black Lives Matter, criminal justice. To be fair to you, criminal justice is on your website, but with this passion, why is it not represented in your platform? One, but then two, I think more importantly is, what do you do to address that disconnect? Because if Camden is a part, I know Camden pretty decently. If Camden is a part of your district, how would you connect with that constituency? Likewise, if you can connect with that group, how would Bernie Sanders connect with that group? Because right now there is this pervasive narrative that Bernie Sanders and the Bernie bros just cannot connect with Black people. Did I lose you? Are you there, Alex? Hang on, folks. He is still here. He's reconnecting. That was horrible timing.
I'm sorry. I'm here. I don't know what happened. It just dropped out.
That was Alex, I have to swear, that was the absolute worst timing possible, because I actually hit you with a good question and I lost you.
I got the first half of it. You said it's not on your website and it should be. In the second part, the more important part is, and then it cut out.
Okay, the more important part is, there is this pervasive narrative that Bernie Sanders and the Bernie bros can't connect with the Black vote. And I know Camden well enough to know that if they're part of your district, if you can connect with Camden, then you can help Sanders connect with the Black vote. But my question is, number one, if you're so passionate about it, why is it not on your website? And number two, how do you fix that perception that a Bernie bro, a 24-year-old white guy like yourself, just can't connect with Black people?
So the first part is, we created pretty much all of the policy, everything on the website about 18 months ago. This is before Black Lives Matter started trending, before Bernie Sanders was running for president. Something we're proud of, in that a lot of the exciting progressive policy that we put on there is now sort of part of the public narrative. So I can tell you this, it will be on there tomorrow. And something my apologies, there's oversight, but it is something I passionately support. It will be on there. Number two, how do we connect with Black voters? You just have to be honest. You have to be earnest in the things that you're talking about. You have to be there. You can't come the week before the election and say, hey, vote for me, my ideas line up with you. That does not work, because these are this is a region where people have been promised and told things time and time again, similar to other Black communities all across the country, but they've been taken advantage of by these millionaires and billionaires, people who have this political power and are not looking out for them. They just want their vote. So you have to be there. That's why I've been out on the street picketing, marching with a megaphone with my friends in the Save the Public Schools movement here in Camden. That's something we can get into another time, but there's a whole issue where the public schools are being destroyed in the city, which is a terrible, terrible thing for the future well-being of the city. So that's number one, being there. Number two, you have to make sure that when you are talking to folks in the suburbs, when you're talking to folks in other towns, that you do not forget about Camden, that you do not only talk about Camden issues when you're talking to Camden. It has to be a part of your message. It can't be a message that is only delivered to the Black community, because all people can smell when you're full of it. And if you make it part of who you are, and you make it part of when you talk to Haddonfield, when you talk to Camden, when you talk to Voorhees, when you talk to any town, it goes a long way. So I think you have to be there, and you have to make it part of your message.
Let me jump in there, and Alex, and I do want you to come back on my show, but I have to push back on one thing. Now, first, let me start with the good. In any profession, you always give something good before you give something bad. The good thing is you're going to put it on your site tomorrow. I applaud you for that. I think it speaks volumes that you're willing to make that change and make that correction, mainly because it's very important that it's not neglected, because it can easily backfire on you, right? So I appreciate that. But Black Lives Matter started in 2013. The hashtag actually started in 2013, and it has been around for some time. So, the fact that your site has been up since now, if your site has been up for 18 months, I give you that. That is a long time, and it may not have been an issue prevalent in front of you right then. So I'm going to thank you in advance. Everybody on my site, everyone who's listening now, I want you guys to go to his site tomorrow, and I want you to see if he's made those changes. Let's give him to the end of business tomorrow to make those changes. And if he makes those changes and you like everything else that he said, because I do, Alex, I like you. And I like what you stand for. I like your energy. I want you guys to not only go to his site and see if he adds Black Lives Matter, but I want you to go to his site and make some phone calls for him, because anyone who's willing to adapt and change and someone who stands for progressive values and has some technology that we can actually spread to help progressivism is really something that is a benefit. Now, I softened that up as much as I can, as much as I could. But just to be straight, it did start in 2013 after George Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin. Hang on, before I move too fast, I don't know if you want to say anything after that.
No, I mean, I think that's great, and we're gonna make sure that it's up there, and we'll move forward. It's gonna be good.
Hey, that's all we can do is move forward. I have a caller who's been on hold. I didn't clear whether or not you wanted to take calls beforehand, but he's here and we've already asked. So 517, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hello?
Yep, this is you. You're live on the air with Alex Law and Benjamin Dixon. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hello, my name is William, and sorry, just a little feedback that caused me a stutter. Anyways, the comment that I have is that actually the reason why Bernie Sanders is connecting well with the Black community is because large majority of the establishment within the Black community is already sided with Clinton because they know her well. She's well connected. So when you have someone who is supposed to be a leader,
well, let me do this. Let me jump in here for 1 second and let me ask you: do you have a question specific for Alex? Because if not, we're going to go into great detail. I can keep you on hold. Do you have a question specifically for Alex Law?
Alex, have you looked into any of Hillary Clinton's policies, and what is your judgment based on those policies?
Okay, so the question is, have you listened to any of Hillary Clinton's policies, and which of those policies, it sounds like, do you have any type of, I don't know, quite, let me put you back on hold, caller. I don't think he was actually ready for you, Alex. So in fairness, I'm not going to make you answer, but if you heard it, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm someone who lives and breathes politics and follows all of what's going on nationally, and Hillary Clinton is someone who's been a disappointment for me personally. Someone who I think the issue for me that sums up her candidacy is the issue with the bank transcripts, and that, you know, there's all these questions with how she's raising money and who's supporting her and whose interest she really has at heart, whether it's us or banks. And then she's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from banks and won't tell us what she said to them. And her only answer is, well, that's what they wanted to pay me, and I'm not releasing anything. And to me, that's just, it's shameful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me ask you this last question, Alex, because you've been with me for about 25 minutes now, and you only, you know, we only asked for 15 minutes of your time. So I want to respect your time. Tell us why you are, you know, give us your elevator speech on why you are a progressive and why you support Bernie Sanders.
Well, sure. And I get this question all the time. So, and I'm a big quotes person, and the people that in my office, they hear me talking about quotes all the time. And the one that I use when I'm talking about why I'm a progressive comes from one of my personal heroes, Bobby Kennedy from 1968, when he said, what we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion towards one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who suffer within our country. And to me, that really sums up what it means to be a progressive, that when you're thinking about policy, when you're thinking about what government should do, the first thing that you think about is how we can help people, that people matter in politics. And that has been the backbone of our campaign, along with something, and a much shorter quote that Teddy Roosevelt said, when he said, when we rule ourselves, we have the responsibility of sovereigns, not of subjects. So those two quotes have been defining pillars that have held up this campaign and what we believe in and why we believe so passionately in values.
Excellent. I have a question here from our chat room that I'm going to lay this on you, because it's coming from our chat room, and my chat room is always on 100 on beast mode. But I'm gonna preface this by saying I personally don't think this question is fair to lay at his feet, but I'm going to ask it. The reason I don't think it's fair to lay at his feet is because it's a question we have to lay at the feet of everyone. The question is, with regard to Black Lives Matter, this is from Will. Will wants to know, why is it only an issue for you once it became trending? Why did you not feel that your brothers and sisters in the human race, why did you not feel for your brothers and sisters in this human race until it was a politicized issue?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it sort of speaks to, I think, what I miscommunicated. It's not that you could see all of the policies we have on our site addresses the things that Black Lives Matter stands for better, more responsible policing, for comprehensive drug reform, for getting rid of private prisons, for making sure that there isn't laws that prevent certain groups in this country from voting. These things that Black Lives Matter are looking to accomplish, we have supported. We just didn't have the phrase on there because it was an oversight. But I passionately support these issues, and from day one on our website, all of them have been on there.
I agree with that. I do agree with you that there are issues, whether or not you go underneath the banner or not. But let me tell you where I disagree, even with the premise of the question. I disagree with the premise of the question because so many people, not just white people, even African Americans, did not have the issue of Black Lives Matter in the forefront, regardless of the mantra or the slogan. It really required a political movement like Black Lives Matter to usher it into the forefront. Now, I agree with you that all of the underlying issues should be addressed on a regular basis. And you're saying that the core of your platform, and everyone can evaluate that for themselves, the core of your platform actually sustains or addresses issues, rather, that are pertinent to improving the lives of African Americans and Black Americans across the country. But it still speaks volumes to the fact that an issue, and I'm addressing the question more so than you, the issue is something that out of sight, out of mind, right? We really did not have a laser-like focus. No one, not President Obama, not yours truly, no one. And that's one of the reasons that I applaud Black Lives Matter so much, is because they're bringing a reality to the forefront of everyone's conversation that we have all been negligent on. Because honestly, let's ask ourselves personally, did we think about the prevalent, did we even know about the prevalent issues, the daily killings, before social media exposed it to us? I think most people thought everything was hunky-dory and peachy keen, right? Until we start seeing on social media how bad things really were. So that's really, I'm really speaking to my audience more than you, because for me, the premise of the question, it's a great question to ask you. Thank you for the answer. But I think it really speaks to a bigger issue, that out of sight, out of mind. And we're really that type of country that if we don't have something pushed in our forefront on a regular basis, then it really would escape us, because all of us are going about our 9-to-5-day job. Listen, I didn't mean to go off on my tangent, because I'm going to do that for the next 45 minutes. Alex, let's talk more about you. One thing I do want to say is you absolutely take these questions like a champ. I really appreciate that. I want everyone to go to your site tonight, and I want you to see his site tonight. But more importantly, I want you to go tomorrow so we can see what he says about Black Lives Matter. With everything else that he said, I think everyone listening, I think at least 10% of you should go out there and make some calls for him. That's just my personal opinion. I'm a good judge of character, Alex, and I like what you stand for. Tell everyone how they can support you, where they can reach you, and what's next.
Yeah, well, first I want to say I'm looking forward to when I come back on the show and we can have a deep dive into some specific issues, and that's going to be a lot of fun for your audience. But if you do want to support the campaign, let me just tell you this. We are a district with 174,000 Democrats and only 60,000 Republicans, which means the winner of the Democratic primary wins the general election.
Yeah.
And we have a Democrat in there that has voted with Republicans more than any Democrat in the state of New Jersey. We need to change that, and we need to change it now. This is an election where the winner will get 20,000 votes or less out of 174,000 Democrats. So every phone call you make, every $5 you contribute to our campaign will mean that we reach someone that votes, that will vote in this election, and it will make a huge impact to the bottom line of deciding who wins this election, who represents South Jersey. So when I ask you to come make calls for me, when I ask you to donate, I ask you that with a plan in place for how we are going to win, and we expect to win this election on June 7th, 2016. So you can do that by going to alexlawforcongress.com, or you can go to callsforalex.com. Both of them, the Calls for Alex, you can go make calls. The Alex Law for Congress will have all the information, the policy, the videos, the news articles, the contribution link, and a link to the Calls for Alex. I hope you will come on board. And if you send a message to the website, I respond to every single person. It's been thousands. Every single person that writes to our website, I respond to personally. So if you want to ask me a question later, you can do it there.
Alex, thank you so much for your time. Let's schedule another time. There's a long time between now and June. Not long enough, but there's enough time for us to have another call. And we should do not a call, but a video. And we'll do a video on a specific issue, whether it be Israel and Palestine, a two-state solution, or anything else. Let's talk about it via email. So thanks so much for.
Thank you for having me, and looking forward to the next one.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right, everyone. That has been Alex Law for Congress. Go to alexlawforcongress.com. I really enjoyed that interview. One, he's thorough. And he takes these questions. And I want to unpack. Well, actually, I already unpacked it, but there's a lot of things that. Anyway. We'll get to it. I have plenty of time. All right. So the same caller has been on hold, and we were talking about, caller, I thank you so much for your patience. We were talking about Bernie Sanders, the black vote, and you were saying that part of the problem you feel is that a lot of the black establishment has already been in the tank for Hillary Clinton. So I'm gonna let you start there and finish your question so we can talk about that.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the Black Caucus, you can see a good portion of them already supporting Hillary Clinton. The problem is that Hillary Clinton is going to be, she's going to be very deceptive when elected as president. And the problem this gets into is not that she's necessarily going to be a bad president, but she's already agreed at one point while she was working at Secretary of State to lobby for Social Security cuts.
Mm-hmm.
She's already done and lobbied for welfare cuts. The problem with this is not that that she would do it. The problem is that there's going to be another recession due to a lot of studies that economists have been doing, because we have too many trusts, too big to fail banks. We have too many. The last fee goes not in place, so your depositing money is being gambled. So if it's lost, it's gone.
Okay.
And because of all the stuff that's going to happen is when we crash.
Well, let me jump in there. Let me jump in there because I think you started with the most important thing. Listen, thanks so much for the call, and I want to unpack what you already said. You started with something, and that's the reason I unmuted you again, was because this big question about the black vote that we've been talking about all day on the subreddit and Bernie Sanders is I think you hit a portion of it. I was talking to a source, a very credible source that I can't name. I've got sources now, anyway, that is the core of the problem, is that a lot of the black Democratic establishment has already been tanked. They have already been in the tank for Hillary Clinton. They have already been bought, with opportunities. They've been bought with campaign contributions. They've been bought with access to power. And so it is going to be that much more difficult for Bernie Sanders to get any endorsement because they have all been snatched up by Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has been working on this since 2008. As soon as she lost the nomination to Barack Obama, she started working on the next campaign. And she has subsequently wrapped up all of the super delegates that she possibly could, all of the black vote that she could. And let's just be real. As much as I deride black leadership, especially older black leadership, particularly establishment older black leadership, or even younger, the fact of the matter is they still wield a significant amount of influence. And so Hillary Clinton snatching up the John Lewis's, the James Clyburn, all of the different people that they have snatched up. In reality, that is quite a bit of influence that she has already taken the oxygen out of the room from Bernie Sanders. That's just the fact of the matter. Now, there are so many other things that we talked about, and this is one of the things I wanted to unpack with Alex that we really didn't get on was, I don't think we directly got on it, but we did talk about it in the sense of how does a white Bernie bro, right? Let's just go with the very worst description. Let's go with that young 24-year-old white Bernie bro. How could they possibly connect with the black community? And I think that's all that's left at this point, because if we are waiting on some endorsement from a super black leader, that's not coming. Hillary Clinton already snatched those up. If we're waiting on a black political thought, they are attacking Cornel West left and right. They attack Killer Mike left and right. So it can't come from anyone that's like a celebrity. It has to come from that one-to-one relationship between a quote unquote Bernie bro and someone from the African American community. The problem is that unless you actually have a real conversation like Alex and I just had, it's going to be kind of impossible for Bernie to connect with the African American community. The most important thing is that dialogue, that conversation. Let's just be real. Alex wasn't really, Black Lives Matter wasn't on his radar, not as a direct issue. As an economic issue, it has always been on his radar, just like it has always been on Bernie Sanders' radar. Because when you talk about the economics of America, you can't talk about the economic plight of poor people in America and not talk about the economic plight of African Americans. So in a very real sense, someone like Alex and someone like Bernie Sanders has been connected to the cause of the black community for a long time, but not in a very specific racial definition. And because we do live in the era where you need to be able to connect on a very real, tangible connection of race. and realized that you weren't talking about our issue directly from a racial perspective. You were talking about our issue directly from an economic perspective, but we also want you to talk to us in terms of race and the reality that we don't connect naturally without us putting some effort into connect and just to talk. All of that to say, the bottom line is, if Bernie Sanders and the Bernie bros and the black Bernie bros and the black burners and everyone who's involved in this, if we just open communications, you will see that there is so much more that we connect with rather than that divides us. And that this false narrative, which is, I'm going to get on this next after this next call, this false narrative that's being pushed by black media elite like Goldie Taylor, like Jonathan Capehart, like Charles Blow, like Joy-Ann Reid, that false narrative can fall apart because you know what? The truth of them, here's a secret, and I'm going to take this call. The secret is African Americans don't connect with them. We might identify with them, but we don't connect with them. Joy-Ann Reid knows no more about the African-American plight, the average African-American plight, than Alex Law did before he started digging into Black Lives Matter. Real talk. Because if you go to Ivy League, went to Ivy League, you're making 6 figures, 6.5 figures, you're doing great. You don't understand what it's like to be the average American, let alone the average African-American, 51% youth unemployment, 31% in poverty. So truth be told, if a poor white guy would stop trying to convince us about Bernie Sanders' civil rights credentials and would just talk with us realistically about how messed up this economic system is, about how hard he has to work and how hard you have to work and how hard we have to work, and just talk realistically instead of trying to push Bernie Sanders marched with Martin Luther King down our throats, and just talk to us about the fact that we're all up at 5:30 in the morning and we all are working all day long and working for money that barely pays the bills. You can connect with us way faster than a Charles Blow, Jonathan Capehart, Joy Reid, Goldie Taylor combined into one megazord of blackness. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and a question?
Hi, it's John from Mississippi.
John, what's happening, man? That's always a pleasure. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to say that it, like the absurdities and the hypocrisy in this election are getting pretty wild. But I think it's interesting. One of the ones that's coming up on me is how there's all this constant emphasis on how Bernie needs to connect with different demographics, right? I mean, like there isn't a news cycle that goes by where we don't, where we aren't reminded of how he's struggling to get black votes. Yet, the idea is completely abandoned of, well, what does Hillary Clinton need to do to get youth votes?
Or better yet, John.
I remember.
John, let me jump in there because this is important. It's important. Or what does Hillary Clinton do to even deserve the black vote that she already has? Right? There's no conversations about that whatsoever. I'm sorry, I just had to put that in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, but there's so much analysis and the even people that are like all pro Clinton now put so much emphasis on how important the youth vote was to Barack Obama's success in both elections, both his initial election and his own incumbency, which the youth vote was critical in helping him retain that. And it just killed me. Like even in the debate when Hillary Clinton was asked, directly, like, what are you going to do to youth vote? He's like, oh, well, we'll just figure it out later or something, And no, now is the time to win our votes. Now is the time to make our appeal. Just like now is the time for Bernie to make his pitch to the black community and to the Hispanics.
Absolutely. And even something more than that, John, because I agree with everything you said. Let me clear this line because I have a lot of callers tonight. The one thing I agree with you said the most is I actually, let me look at the position these people put me in. I swear, I can't say that. Can I say that? They really tested my blackness here, right? They're testing my blackness because they're putting me in a position where I have to defend a whole bunch of white people. My wife is laughing at me, but no, that's the truth. Like because they are doing something to me that is, and when I say they, I'm talking about the black media elite right now. I'm talking about the people who are on television and people who write in these major outlets. They are doing something to me that is an injustice. And I don't care if the injustice is coming from someone who has my skin color. I have to speak out about that injustice. And it just so happens that this puts me at odds with people who have the same skin color as me. And now I have to go defend people who don't have the same skin color as me. So this is an awkward position. But if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be me, because I'm going to be true to myself. Here's the thing. It is so offensive for people to dismiss the people who do support Bernie Sanders. There is nothing wrong with white people supporting Bernie Sanders. To me, it is so disingenuous for them to dismiss a whole swath of voters in Nevada, in Iowa, in New Hampshire, and say, oh, those are just white voters. You know, he's going to get white voters. That's not, as if they're not human beings, as if their votes don't count. It is so insulting to me for them to play this racial identity politics to the detriment of the black community, yes, but also to dismiss an entire group of people out of political expediency. The next person you hear dismiss white voters as if they are nobody, think about it if they had just dismissed black voters as if they were nobody. And anybody, you can say what you want to. Come call me what you want to call me. Say I lost my black card. I got a deeper black card than the rest of you and your mama. So come see me. But the fact of the matter is, to me, it is patently disgusting for media to completely dismiss all of the people who do support Bernie Sanders as if their vote doesn't matter, as if their presence doesn't matter, or as if their presence is a bad thing. That's number one. Number two, like John said on the call, for all of these people who are saying Bernie has a demographic problem, no one has asked the question why Hillary Clinton deserves the black vote. That's the number one question. What has Hillary Clinton done to deserve such a huge advantage in South Carolina? Because then if we're going to look at what she's done, you can't tell me a single thing that she has done to deserve the black vote historically. These are the types of things that we're talking about on the Sanders subreddit this week. We're on the Sanders subreddit. I want you to go over there and I want you to participate in these conversations, because we are going to have real conversations that nobody else is going to have. Nobody else is going to talk about the real disconnect between why it is even uncomfortable for black people to talk to white people about certain things. Hillary Clinton's camp, they're just going to exploit the fact that it's uncomfortable. At least over here, we're discussing about why there is an uncomfort and what we can do to overcome it so that we can see what we have in common and move forward. That's what we're doing on the Sanders subreddit this week. Go to my Twitter timeline. You'll see the link. Just go to the Sanders subreddit. You'll see it. Those conversations going on over there are important, because I would much rather be a part of a group of people who are having uncomfortable conversations to make progress than people who are exploiting uncomfortable conversations. And that's what I'm seeing from all these black media elite. That's what I'm seeing from all of these black establishment politicians, from John Lewis. He's exploiting it. James Clyburn. This weekend, James Clyburn said that there's no free lunch, that there's not going to be any free college. You know, this is not only are they exploiting the discomfort between blacks and whites, but they're also playing and pandering conservative talking points just to oppose Bernie Sanders. Now, listen, my platform is about media in general and politics in general and progressivism in specific. My platform is not Bernie Sanders, Benjamin Dixon show. However, because nobody else is talking about this, because nobody else is actually unpacking these uncomfortable conversations that need to be had, well, damn it, somebody got to do it, so I might as well do it. I will be glad when this election is over so that I can simply talk about the things that I want to talk about, which is progressivism, by the way. But the fact of the matter is, you have all of these black media. I'm sorry, caller, you can call back 857-600-0518. You have all of these media elites, particularly black media elites, who are exploiting the discomfort and the unease and the racial tension that exists between African Americans and white Americans, particularly Bernie bros. They're exploiting that instead of unpacking the conversation. And so what do we have to do? We have to go over to the Sanders subreddit to have a conversation that should be had on national media. These conversations should be fostered by Joy-Ann Reid. These conversations should be fostered by Charles Blow. These conversations should be fostered by Jonathan Capehart and Goldie Tater and the rest of them. But they're not. Instead, they're just exploiting for clicks the discomfort that remains between African Americans and white Americans. Instead of elevating the conversation, they're debasing the conversation, and they're exploiting it for an agenda. And that agenda is to protect the status quo. It's not just for clicks. It's not just for money. It's because they have benefited from the status quo, and they want to sustain and maintain the status quo because it's done just fine for them. Well, you know what? For 31% of African Americans who are living in poverty, the status quo does not do just fine for us. For the 51% of youth, of black youth who are unemployed, this status quo does not work fine just for us. For all of the people, black and white, who are born in poverty, who are destined to stay in poverty because of the status quo, this system does not work fine just for us. So I am sick and tired of these bourgeois. I'm sick and tired of these people who have no economic experience like we have had, dictating to me that I should not be concerned about economics while they are sitting in their loft in Manhattan working on their next piece for their next show, for their next article, while the rest of us have to grind from 5:30 in the morning to midnight. Caller, I'm sorry, you're on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Is it me?
Yep, this is you. Whatever you want to talk about. I'm off my rant. What's up, man?
My name is Nick. I'm from Texas. I just want to make a comment that really reached out for me when you watched the debate between Hillary Clinton, especially the second one where she got asked about that money and she just kind of shrugged her shoulders. Like when she did that to me, that just showed that she just didn't care.
She didn't care,
and it didn't matter that it was bad or anything like that. She didn't care because as long as she's better than a Republican, you're going to vote for her.
Right.
She knows that, and the Democratic Party has been using that for years and years and years. And whenever you try to tell someone, hey, if you keep voting that way, we're never going to get anything because we haven't got anything in the past. We just keep voting for Democrats and say it's going to change something. But in the end, what do? Social policies that pick around the edges, that don't really change the fundamental problems. They just get the low-hanging fruit, and they just try to pacify everybody with that. So we never really change anything, or we just keep sliding to the right.
Yeah, exactly. Slide to the right. That's exactly what's happening.
I mean,
go ahead.
The last thing I want to say about this one is a lot of times, every time you elect a Democrat, they kind of hold the line. We don't necessarily move to the right. They hold the line. But then elections swing. They swing right. They swing left. Over and over and over. Eventually, you're going to lose. No matter how many strains and wins you put together, you're going to lose. Yep. You're going to lose big.
It's the law of averages,
every time
man.
they get a Republican in there, he strong arms it. He hammers down. He gets everything he wants, and we get slid back to the right again.
Exactly.
A Democrat comes in. They fix 2 out of 10 things that's wrong, and then they hold the line again.
Exactly.
40 years of that. Look where we're at. People can't even realize that something like universal health care is possible.
It's not even the best.
We used to actually have free college education in this country.
Right.
It's not even anybody's mind anymore because 35 years we lost it.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much for that call. You hit it on the head. We'll all be Kathy E on the YouTube channel said we'll all be sliding to the right. That's what we're gonna say from now on. We're just sliding to the right. With Hillary Clinton, we're sliding to the right. And that's the reality of it is. The reality of it is that Hillary Clinton at best will be a status quo politician, and she is going to hold the line right where we are. But where we are right now is definitely way further to the right than where we were in 1964. Right in 1980, even with Ronald Reagan. I'm going to take this next call, but I want to answer a question from the chat room. The question from the chat room that came up was from who said it? Here, Fluffy Bunny. You guys have great names. Fluffy Bunny says, Ben, are you saying Bernie really has no chance with black voters? Absolutely not. I'm saying quite the contrary. I'm saying we have an opportunity. I'm saying it's going to be difficult. We have an opportunity to foster conversations between African Americans and white people who, this is the key thing, right? You have an entire group of people who are making money off of the exploitation between the difficulty of the conversation between black people and white people. They're making money off the fact that it's easy for them to paint Bernie Sanders and Bernie Bros as having a race problem. And what I'm saying is, if we pull their race card, pull their card and foster these conversations and actually have some substance. And what that's going to require everyone from who's been deemed a Bernie Bro to go further and deeper than what Charles Blow and Jonathan Capehart and Joy Reid and Goldie Taylor would ever imagine. Because to them, they expect you to do this and nothing more. They expect you to share a meme of Bernie Sanders being arrested or marching or protesting. And they expect the extent of your engagement with the black community to end there. If that is the extent of your engagement with the African-American community, you have already lost, and there is no hope. But with conversations like we're having on the Sanders subreddit this week, conversations like I'm having on this show, the conversations that, for the love of God, the conversations that our black journalists should be fostering, but they're not. If we could have those conversations, then we would eviscerate this false narrative that Bernie Sanders has a race problem, because we will have conversations that they cannot break. Imagine if every Bernie Bro, and I'm just going to use that because what the hell, every Bernie Bro had a conversation with a black person like Alex and I just had. Let's just be real. You weren't really interested until it became a thing. You might have been interested from an economic perspective, but you didn't identify it as a racial component. Right? You didn't identify it specifically as a problem that's prevalent in the black community. And you're interested now. Why are you interested now? You want my vote. Okay, tell me why I should give you my vote beyond Bernie Sanders' March with Dr. King. You see that? I know I said a whole lot, because it is a whole lot. And the onus is on us who know better to do better. And this is why I'm so ticked off with these fake black journalists, because they are not interested in elevating the conversation. They're interested in manipulating the conversation. And they have the platform to actually change America at a very critical point. But instead of elevating the conversation, they're basically just doing hit pieces and fake journalism to the detriment of the black community. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Bobby.
Bobby.
Hello.
Yeah, we spoke before, Bobby. Glad to have you back on the line. What's on your mind?
You know, I see that you've increased the intensity of the info war. This is funny, right? Well, there's two things I wanted to bring up. Hillary, the whole Clinton clan, Chelsea, Hillary, Bill. The news reports on it. Hillary goes to the BlackRock billionaire house for a private fundraiser. Chelsea goes to some other hedge fund guy. They're going into their personal houses begging for money. This is insane. And CNN and MSN, they just report it like, another day in the park. That's crazy, man. And we're supposed to believe a quid pro quo doesn't exist,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. But the second thing, right? Well, there's another real quick thing. I think either Bernie Sanders got right around 50% of the Latino vote, which is incredible because nobody saw that coming, I don't think, right? I think he was competitive with the Latino vote, which was, they're not reporting it, right? But even if he lost it by like 1 or 2%, that's I think that's a big deal that he, the message that it got through. Because I don't know what the major news sources, maybe Univision, but I don't know if Univision is being very friendly to Bernie Sanders either, right? Because Univision, Jorge Ramos, I've heard like he has his daughter works for the Clinton campaign, so I'm not sure. But if the message is even penetrating that way, I think that means something, right? I don't know what the grassroots is on that side. But the third thing, and I think this is really interesting too, is it sounds weird, but I have a lot of black friends, right? But you know what? I can't talk to them about Bernie Sanders because then it sounds like I'm almost patronizing. It's like a white person can't talk to anybody about Bernie Sanders because it's almost like, it's almost like you're talking down or you're patronizing. You get what I'm saying? So it's like you're completely crippled. You can't even start the conversation because they're like, oh yeah, what do you know about Bernie? You know what I mean? It's a weird, and I'm like, no, this is just politics, man. I agree that we should ban the death penalty and we should legalize marijuana and we should have a higher minimum wage and the rich should pay more taxes. But as soon as you mention him, it's like, like red flags go up.
But that is not just because. That is very intentional. That has been a narrative that has been craftedly weaved over the summer. If we had started this conversation in June, there would be no Bernie has a minority problem kind of conversation because it didn't exist, right? That false narrative has been meticulously woven, that's the word I'm looking for, woven into the national discourse on purpose to make sure that Hillary Clinton maintains the black firewall throughout the South. Now, the problem is for them is that we actually can overcome that because it's just going to require, let me start that sentence again. If white Americans who are passionate about Bernie would dig deeper inside of themselves and start the conversation from wherever that African American wants to start the conversation and listen. It's going to take that type of communication skill, that type of commitment to listen first before you transmit, receive, listen to what they're saying. And then if you can connect Bernie Sanders to something that they're fighting for, something that they believe in, then they're open to hear you. But that's not an easy thing to do with any human being, right? Listen, thanks so much for the call, man. That's not an easy thing to do for any human being, which means the job is going to be that much more difficult for people who love Bernie Sanders and want to connect with the black vote. I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. I'm telling you the exact opposite. I'm saying this is going to be a very difficult thing for you because one, you're going to have to admit that I've been talking more than I've been listening. That I've been trying to shove Bernie Sanders' civil rights pass down their throats without considering the fact that maybe, just maybe, they're not as concerned with Bernie Sanders' civil rights participation. That's not the only thing that black people are concerned with. Maybe I should take a minute and take a step back and say, what are they interested in? What's important to you? Maybe I should listen first. So let me repeat the core thing. One, join us over at the Bernie Sanders subreddit and engage in these types of conversations because nobody else is having them. And that speaks volumes about how poor our media really is. And it speaks volumes about the willingness of the Bernie Sanders camp to actually listen. So go to the Bernie subreddit and join that conversation. I'm over there taking questions. And listen, I'm going to be honest with you. Like right now, I am not in media mode. I am not in journalist mode whatsoever. I am in a straight commentator trying to fight back against a false narrative that has been promulgated by people with the same skin color as me, to the detriment of people with skin color just like me. So I have to fight back. Like you said, it's an info war. I have to fight not Alex Jones InfoWars, but I have to fight back against these false narratives Because who else is? What black journalist on television right now is elevating the conversation to be about why there is a disconnect? What can we do about the disconnect? And then that's number one. Then number two, why does Bernie Sanders have a hard time? But more importantly, what has Hillary Clinton ever done to deserve the African-American vote? Who is doing that? Nobody but a guy on YouTube with 150 viewers right now. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and a question?
Hey, Ben, it's Patrick from Miramar, Florida calling.
Patrick, my main man, what's on your mind, man? Thanks for the call.
Well, I mean, just a slight pushback to what you're saying. I agree theoretically with what you're saying, but I'm speaking from purely my own anecdotal experiences from the barbershop.
Okay.
You know, I'm in there every 2 weeks getting a haircut, and we talk about this, and it almost kind of reminds me of trying to talk to a Republican about global warming and how their base have been programmed to believe that's a hoax. So no matter what facts you bring, you can't argue with someone when you guys can agree on the facts. And I can't tell you how many heated barbershop discussions I have, and I realize that the Clintons have been laying down this foundation way before the election. And I agree with you. It's like since 2008, after the inauguration, they started laying down this foundation that they are pro-black and they're on black people's side. So even if, at least from my own personal experience, when you try to engage in the conversation, you're not starting from a neutral position. You must first debunk the Clinton myth first. It's not like we had two new politicians who no one's used to. Then you start right from the middle, from the objective position, and you can convince someone. We're starting at a deficit, and that's just my own personal
No, I don't
experience.
disagree with you. I agree with you. I
Hear
agree
your
with you
comment
100%.
on YouTube.
Well, okay, yeah. Appreciate the call, man. It's always a pleasure. For me, we are starting at a deficit, which requires extra effort. It requires extra effort, right? It requires personal relationships. It requires the fact that, for example, okay, I'm just going to be 100% transparent. God, y'all get me to tell everything. I hope she sleeps. Is my wife asleep? All right, here's a secret. Let me tell you how you do this. Number one, you can never force something down somebody's throat. You can't. I will not ask my wife who she's voting for. Not yet. Not yet. Because I don't want to force who I think is best down her throat. What I'm going to do instead is just little by little expose her to the very best things about what Bernie Sanders stands for. Little by little, I might drop something in her mailbox about his civil rights activism. You know, better coming from me than maybe her white coworker. Little by little, I'm going to expose her to the differences in policies. Little by little, it's a slow relationship that must be built. You cannot, sorry, 607, call me back. You cannot do it in one sitting. Because if you're dealing with people, not that my wife is this person, but I'm just using this as an example. Yes, I know, Robert, Jordan, I do know the rules of the castle. More than importantly, I know the rules of women. I will applaud myself there because I do. But anyway, I know the rules of communication, and the rules of communication is simply this: you cannot force a concept on someone. They have to see it for themselves. And so all you can do is very gently lay out the truth. You may not win. You may not, but you definitely will lose if you try to shove it down their throat. Now, somebody in the chat room wants to know why the Sanders subreddit, because no one else is really having a meaningful conversation like that, right? You know, we are over there all week long. I'm actually a part of it. I'm actually taking questions every single day about these things in specific, right? And we want to get it on the record of what we can do to actually fight back against the false narrative, because the false narrative is so detrimental to America in general. All right, let me take this last caller. Well, actually, I'm going to take one more caller after this. I'm waiting on 607 to call back, but this is 347. 347, you're live on the air. With whom am I speaking?
Umar from Brooklyn.
Umar from Brooklyn. I thought this was you, my friend. What's going on?
I have to agree with you. First, I want to applaud you for all the work you've been doing. I've been seeing your tweets, even if I've been actually too busy to tweet, which is really weird to say. But I think the way things are going are more awesome than people think, and the narrative that they're putting out, despite Nevada, people are forgetting how much Bernie took away from Hillary and how much she had to really fight for that victory. But I want to piggyback off what you just said, because I agree. We can't possibly let the louder voices win.
Right.
It has to be other voices. I mean, I was in a situation where starting a whole voter registration thing here in Brooklyn. We're trying to get the newly minted 18-year-olds in. We're trying to push the thing. And I actually got into a dispute with somebody about the Hillary thing. And I could tell that despite all else, as I've been saying for weeks, is that first woman president thing. And I'm going to, like I said, I give that it's due. But even if they block us, even if they want to get loud, they can't be the only voice, because you're not speaking to them. You're speaking to everyone else watching the talk.
Right.
And you can't let it only be one side.
Right.
Because the fence sitters need a push, and you don't want them being pushed the other way. I mean, and I'm really irritated by fence sitters. I'm a take a stand person, but I also understand the whole voter apathy thing. I get that, but I don't think we're having a case this time around. I think people are motivated on any side, on Bernie's, on Hillary's, and Lord help us, on Trump's. Because they feel this change. They feel this is, I mean, I'm not trying to, I guess we're both sitting here praising white guys.
Exactly, right?
I'm not trying to give him, but what Trump is really representing is something different from the establishment.
Right.
That's what Bernie is representing. And by symbol, that's what Hillary is representing. Because every progressive I argue with, they go, Hillary is progressive. Who are y'all to say she's not progressive? Even though my answer is progressive. I should know who's not progressive.
Exactly.
But okay, fine. I can feel the place they're coming from. And like I said, we can't let the other side have the only voice. Our voices must be heard. We must make it loud. We can't be intimidated.
Right.
And that's what I had to say.
Umar, always a pleasure, man. Thanks for your comments.
Okay.
857-600-0518. No reason for me to stop now, because I haven't covered anything that I wanted to cover tonight. Anything. Somebody actually, before I even do this, because I don't want to pronounce this lady's last name wrong, somebody call me and tell me how do I pronounce Dolores Huerta, Heurta. How do I pronounce her last name? I don't even want to start this segment until I get her last name right. All right. So the next caller who calls in, I need you to call me and tell me how do I pronounce Huerta. Should have did it before the show. I actually wasn't planning on covering this, but I saw it in the chat room. And so I decided that I should cover this. And let me take this caller. Maybe you could save me. Will from New York. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's going on, Ben?
Nothing much. Actually, I don't know if you heard my call. I was trying to find someone who can tell me how to pronounce Dolores Huerta, Heurta. Say it again. Huerta.
That's what I would think it was pronounced as.
Say it one more again for me.
Huertas.
Okay, that's close enough. All right, what's on your mind? And then I'll start my next segment.
No, I just wanted to call in to applaud you, because I was on hold for a few minutes when you were breaking down the last story that had to do with race and whatnot, and you were showing both sides of the story, and it was pretty cool. Like the marginalization of Bernie Sanders supporters that happen to be white.
Oh my God.
And like, I do appreciate that, because like, you know what? We're not jerks. Most of us that support him are people that are intelligent thinkers that care about everybody else, and it just so happens that we were born into white bodies.
Exactly. Listen, let me narrow it down. Let me say it like this. This is what you made me think of, right? You're not a dick just because you're white, right? So everybody is saying, oh, all his voters are white, so that should tell you something. No, it tells me that there's some people who are white that like Bernie Sanders, and to me that is so condescending and such a form of I'm not even going to call it racism, but it's a form of privilege and condescension that I just can't tolerate, because I no more look down on a person because they're white than I expect them to look down on me because I'm black. And to dismiss everyone who supports him as if it's a negative thing because they're white is really below the belt. Will,
I appreciate you bringing that up, man, because it's so true. And you know my heart. I love everybody. And like, I would imagine a lot of the like young white supporters that see him are intelligent thinkers that love everybody the way that I do. And there is a marginalization there. And just thank you for bringing it up.
My pleasure, man. And then let me say this as I take this next call is that, you know, just because you don't know how to connect with black people does not make you the scum of the earth. Just because you make a mistake on approaching someone saying, hey, Bernie Sanders marched with Martin Luther King, then the black person is going to be like, what's your point? That doesn't make you an asshole. It doesn't make the black person superior or super right. It doesn't make it just means that you guys had a disconnect. And I'm sick and tired of them acting as though because Bernie Sanders' white supporters don't know how to communicate with black people that there's something wrong with Bernie Sanders supporters. No, there's something wrong with America. There's something wrong with America that we're still stuck in this ridiculous place where we can't have conversations about difficult things. And then I realized the reason we can't have conversations about difficult things is because you have people who monopolize on that, who capitalize on that, who take advantage of that and exploit that for political, economic, and those two, political and economic gain. All right, so I'm going with Huerta. If I say it wrong, it's no disrespect. I never took Spanish. I took French. Activist Dolores Huerta sent out a tweet on Saturday saying that there was an English-only chant shouted down at her. She is a longtime supporter of Hillary Clinton, a union leader. She's done a lot in Nevada. She's like political royalty in Nevada. And she, at the caucus, there was someone who needed a translation. She offered to give a translation, and you could see the video for yourself. In the video, someone is yelling, but they are yelling neutral. According to Nevada caucus rules, if there's a translation that needs to take place, they have the right to call for someone who is neutral, someone who is not a part of either camp, to offer that translation. So they were right in terms of the Nevada caucus rules, number one. Number two, they did not yell English only. And I think that's the most important thing about this conversation is that she tweeted this out. It was picked up by a star. I don't know the woman's name who retweeted it, but within about 30 minutes of this event happening, it was super viral all over the internet that here are Bernie bros shouting down racist epithets towards this woman saying English only. And then it like wildfire because it was consistent with this narrative that they try to paint of all Bernie Sanders supporters, saying that they're all just white guys who are racist. Someone said in our chat room, which is very true, Bernie Bros is a convenient way of erasing the fact that there are African Americans, Hispanics, and other minorities who support Bernie Sanders, as well as women who support Bernie Sanders. Matter of fact, I just saw a stat today that Bernie Sanders has more women donors than Hillary Clinton. So the Bernie Bros is a narrative that is simply there to erase women and minorities. Now, because of that, this story from Saturday with Dolores Huerta actually went super viral, and then Snopes.com came out and debunked it the same night. Here's what has happened. It is completely irrelevant to Hillary Clinton supporters that this entire story is wrong, to the point of almost fabricated, where whatever she was feeling, I'm sorry, Dolores, sorry if your feelings were hurt that no one was going to allow you to do the translation when you are a surrogate for Hillary Clinton. Nevada caucus rules said that they have that right. Sorry if your feelings were hurt. But for you to take something that's clearly stated neutral and then translate that to saying English only, maybe it was a good thing they did ask for someone else if your translation skills are that in-depth. I digress. But the point is, you pushed out this narrative that was completely false, and the Hillary Clinton supporters picked it up and ran around the nation, around the globe with it. And once the truth actually came out, nobody cared to do a retraction. Nobody. And that's how you use identity politics to the detriment of the very identities that you're pimping. That's how you use someone being black to the detriment of the black community. That's how you use someone, because honestly, let's just be real. Economic policy wise, Bernie Sanders is going to be more beneficial. Now, setting that aside, that's the premise of my whole next comment. The fact of the matter is that you take someone from a minority community and you get them to feign some type of microaggression or just straight out racial aggression. It retweets and retweets around the internet. Somebody from an Ivy League school journalist picks it up and writes an article about it. Meantime, it has been debunked, but nobody cares that it has been debunked. And so the narrative persists and the truth has been sacrificed, as well as opportunities to help the very people for which they identify with their identity politics. To me, this is one of the most nefarious, one of the most disgusting components of this campaign is the level of dishonesty, swift voting, and manipulation of racial politics to the detriment of those very same races. And this thing out of Nevada with Dolores Huerta, if I'm massacring the last name, I apologize. But this thing out of Nevada is so indicative of the broader story where they are spinning a false narrative. They're cementing it with the power of social media and with the power of media elites. And when it is debunked, nobody does a retraction. Let me take this caller, and I think my voice is almost gone. 339, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and/or question?
Is this me?
This is you. You're
Hello?
live. You're live on the air. What's your name?
Hi, this is Elizabeth in Paris, and I'll tell you how to pronounce that woman's name, which is Huerta.
What?
You know, like where?
Where?
Huerta. You don't pronounce the H. It's like a where, like a W sound. Huerta.
Huerta. Okay. Dolores Huerta.
Huerta, and it means sit.
Huerta. Dolores.
I can't hear you.
Hang on. Let me. Oh, you know what? Hang on. I have this down. Hold on. Can you hear me now? Okay. Her name is Dolores Huerta. Okay. I give up. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hang up on you like that. All right, folks. I had a cold already. Kids brought another cold home. I think this is a good spot as any. Oh, no, I do want to talk about John Kasich. Let me talk about John Kasich. His ugly mug is on my screen. I have to talk about this, and then we're going home for real. I did this in the daily brief, which I don't think I'm going to do the daily brief anymore. Just thinking out loud. Anyway, John Kasich signed legislation to strip over $1 million in government money from Planned Parenthood. I already discussed the fact that this money was used for HIV, STD testing, breast and cervical cancer screenings. There's so many things that Planned Parenthood does beyond abortions. Okay, full disclosure. It's not even a full disclosure thing. Listen, when you're poor, which I have been, like legitimately poor, and you need to get somewhere to find a screening for STD, Planned Parenthood is there, whether you're a woman or a man. I've done some partying in my days. I made it out, but I had to make a stop at Planned Parenthood because I didn't have a doctor. I didn't have any, I didn't have any money. All I knew was that, hey, you know, I need to get some things checked out here. But anyway, the point is, it's not funny. It's funny to me now because I'm old and that's behind me. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot minimize the contributions that Planned Parenthood does beyond a woman's right to choose. And to be able to get an HIV screening when you don't have a doctor, this is going to detrimentally affect the poorest people. I know because I was there. I was poor enough to not have a dime to go anywhere, and I went to Planned Parenthood and got screened. And so somebody like John Kasich, who is the moderate Republican, is really putting his state at risk because there are so many poor people who are not going to be, and not just STD screenings, breast cancer and cervical cancer. It's like well established that Planned Parenthood does more screenings than they do anything else. And it's also well established that the money that comes from the federal government does not go directly to abortions. But because of the political campaign season that it is, and because John Kasich needs to get some brownie points with the evangelical voters, and he needs to get some brownie points with the pro-life voters, he goes back to his state and he undermines the very health and the very security of the poorest people out there. And I can't emphasize enough that this is the moderate Republican. Now, here's the problem from a progressive perspective. We're fighting against conservatism in our own ranks. But now when we look at, and let me finish that thought, they are exploiting the fact for years that many progressives have been so terrified of Republicans that they will go with the lesser, or what we thought was the lesser of two evils. And now we see with someone that most Democrats actually could palate, which is a John Kasich, we see that he is as extreme as any other Republican because he's willing to gut a program that is focused on the health of women, particularly the poorest women in his state, and men, because there's some men that goes to Planned Parenthood. He's willing to do that for political expediency and political gain. We have a challenge as progressives to beat back against conservatism creeping in our ranks, against, and not just any type of conservatism, this Karl Rove type of conservatism, right? This conservatism that really doesn't care about anyone who doesn't make underneath six figures. That you're on your own, that we're fighting this in our own ranks, that if you are pregnant, then you did something wrong. If you even need to get an STD test, you did something wrong and you should be on your own. Or if you're poor, you did something wrong and you need to just pull up your pants and go get a job. Would you believe that everything that I just said has been told to me by a Democrat? Not a Republican, but a Democrat. And so we're fighting back against conservatism creeping up in our own ranks, while at the same time we have to fight back against this perverted interpretation of conservatism that is driving the best interest of their constituencies into the ground for political expediency, for political gain. I honestly don't know what to tell you to do, but we're fighting on two fronts. We're fighting on our home front, and we're fighting against conservatism abroad. And we have to be, we have to make some decisions. And I don't know what that decision is. I don't know what the solution is. All I know is the only solution really is to make sure that we elect a true progressive into the White House so that we can fight back and really push our country back in the right direction. Now, I'm completely out of gas. I'm completely out of voice. I will see you guys later. Where's my closing music? Guys, it's been real. Be sure to check out theprogressivearmy.com for latest articles. Be sure to check out thebenjamindixonshow.com. Register for our blog. If you like the show, become a Patreon. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on Spreaker, all those other places. And follow me on Twitter at the BPD Show. Better yet, let me let my announcer say it. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Crazy mother.
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.